call Stuart Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What you have just seen there is a very short speech which was filled with political speak. Let me just translate that for those who are listening, wondering what they'd just heard. Minister Woodhouse talked about fine-tuning. What that really means is tinkering around the edges. Minister Woodhouse said it provides certainty for all taxpayers. What this actually means is it entrenches inequality and equity. Minister Woodhouse says it's a much more workable system. What that means is we can't be bothered dealing with the really big issues. And finally, Mr. Woodhouse says wide consultation. What that really means is we spoke to the big business end of town to ensure we got their support. Mr. Speaker, there are a cynical, a realist, a pragmatist, because I'm going to be very interested in that member's contribution, because he sat on the Select Committee and he has been a part of a whole suite of tax bills that have come through the FEC, the Finance and Expenditure Select Committee, which are no more than tinkering around the edges when we have a number of really big issues that we face as a country and an economy. Mr. Speaker, Labor does support this bill for a number of reasons. First and foremost, as the Minister said, what it does is this amends a whole lot of other bills where there are errors and omissions, and that is important to maintain the integrity of the tax system. We also support this bill, Mr. Speaker, because anything that can be done to improve R&D spend or get firms thinking about R&D, we would like to encourage. But, Mr. Speaker, I must say that this bill has really missed the trick. The government has really missed a trick with this. Mr. Speaker, there's something called the Kiwi dream. We all know about it, we've all heard about it, we all grew up dreaming it ourselves. What that Kiwi dream consists of is being able to afford a house, to get a good job, to bring up a family in a society which is fair and equitable. It is what is in our DNA. It's what we like to think of as what makes us Kiwis. It's what we like to think the international community thinks of us as Kiwis. But, Mr. Speaker, that Kiwi dream is fast disappearing. And I think the tax system is one of the major sort of drags on our economy that is fast eroding this Kiwi dream. Now, let me tell you why. First and foremost, the Minister talked about the fact that the tax rates are going to remain the same. When I spoke at the Select Committee, the Minister said, Mr. Nash wants to increase taxes. Well, I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that as the revenue spokesperson, I would love to see taxes drop. I really would. But one thing I would like to see more than that is a really equitable tax system. A tax system that was fair, that treated every taxpayer fairly, that if you made money, you paid what you could. That's all, no more, no less. But if it was income coming in, then you paid tax. And what we really need to do, Mr. Speaker, is take a really good, hard look at our tax system and take it from a 20th century model, which I don't think is working particularly well, and drag it into the 21st century. Now, that doesn't mean what you do is you whack up income taxes and say, that's that, all settled, it works. So when Mr. Woodhouse says Labor wants to increase taxes, let me say here for sure, we would love to decrease taxes. But what we need to do is we need to get it right, and we need to treat income, no matter where it comes from, in my view, the same no matter how you earn that income. So we need to get that sorted, but we haven't done that. The second thing, Mr. Speaker, is research and development. If we want to compete on the global market, then what we need to do is harness the intellectual capital that we have as Kiwis. This, Mr. Speaker, is how we are going to realise the Kiwi dream. This is how we're going to get smart Kiwis who are educated, hopefully under Labor, without coming out with a massive student debt which they've got to go overseas to pay and not come back if they can't afford to. But, Mr. Speaker, this is what we've got to do. We've got to get our companies up and running and creating an environment where research and development is at the forefront of everything they do. The problem we've got at the moment, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Bishop knows this, the problem we've got at the moment is our R&D spend is one of the lowest in the OECD. And that is wrong, and we really need to address that. So when this bill is called the Taxation Annual Rates for 2015-16 Research and Development Remedial Matters Bill, there's actually not much in here for research and development. There was a real opportunity here, Mr. Speaker, to be big, to be bold, to take something to the market that says, you know what, We understand where our competitive advantage lies. We understand what brand New Zealand is. We know what we need to do to compete on the global stage. We have to be smarter. We have to be faster. And we've got to do it in a way where Kiwis earn decent wages on a sustainable basis, and it values the sort of education that we know we have the ability to provide in this country. And the way to do that is to provide an environment, a legislative but also a business environment that encourages R&D. And I just don't see this doing this. I just don't. And I thought that the National Party always held themselves up as the party for business. But the reality is, if you look at the reality over the last couple of generations, the party for business, the party where businesses have really grown, is actually under Labour. Labour is actually the government where we're aspirational for businesses and where businesses do well. And when businesses do well, Kiwis are employed. And when Kiwis are employed, that Kiwi dream doesn't just become an aspiration, it becomes a reality. And that, Mr. Speaker, is who we are as New Zealanders. That, Mr. Speaker, is what I want for my 4 children. And I suspect, Mr. Speaker, it's what we want for all New Zealanders growing up. And unless we create the sort of business environment, Mr. Speaker, that encourages New Zealanders to be entrepreneurial, then it won't happen. Because what will happen is our best and our brightest will head overseas, because there are many countries overseas, including one across the ditch, that actually values R&D in a way that is much greater than we do in New Zealand. Much greater in New Zealand. And imagine how many Aussies would be coming here if we had an environment that created and fostered entrepreneurship. They wouldn't have even left in the first place. But imagine how many would be coming back from London if we were talking about a bill now, Mr. Speaker, that provided the sort of incentives that they get in Australia for research and development. I think what we would see is a flood of educated, experienced Kiwis coming back and setting up business here, because they would be finally saying, you know what, I've wanted to come back to New Zealand for so long, now I've got a reason to. But this bill does not give Kiwis a reason to come back. And that is a real shame. It's a real shame, and it is a missed opportunity. The other thing I would say, Mr. Speaker, is Mr. Woodhouse, he thought that he had a problem when he left a portfolio where there was a $10 million blowout in the current HR bill and what was it, Mr. Robinson, about an $80 million blowout in the child support system? About 130 million blowout in the child support. Well, sorry, 10 million blowout in the police. He's come across to a portfolio, Mr. Speaker, where they are in trouble in a lot of their IT projects. $130 million blowout, that is a significant amount of taxpayers' money. Imagine what we could do with $130 million in terms of R&D. Imagine what we could do if we put $130 million into incubators, into fostering business growth, into saying to our young people, come back because we're going to support you. But $130 million isn't that much when you consider the business transformation project, which is looking at a budget of $1 billion. $1 billion. And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, we've got to get this right. But Mr. Speaker, let me wrap up by just making 3 points. We're already in my 3 points. First and foremost, we really missed a trick with this bill. The government really missed a trick with this bill. We would have loved to have seen something brought to the Select Committee that really drove innovation and research and development in a way that made a significant difference and was a reason to bring Kiwis back. Research and development is vital to the growth of an economy like ours. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, you can't continue, not you, Mr. Speaker, the government can't continue to tinker around the edges with the tax system in the way they're doing at the moment, because it solves nothing whatsoever. It just ends up annoying people, and it just perpetrates that inequality and inequity that exists in our tax system. Again, the minister missed a trick. But having said that, he didn't bring this bill. He didn't bring this bill to Parliament. So I will be interested to see if Michael Woodhouse's legacy is someone who takes the bull by the horns and drives that innovation forward in a way that most of us know should be done. The third point I'd like to make, Mr. Speaker, is Mr. Woodhouse does have his work cut out. The IRD is spending a significant amount of money on various IT projects. We're keeping a very close eye on them because we cannot have another blowout to the tune of $130 million on a system now that has a budget of $1 billion. We are supporting this bill, Mr Speaker. Give me 30 seconds, Mr Bishop, your time's coming. We are supporting this bill. 24 seconds. We are supporting this bill, Mr Speaker, but we just thought it could have been so much more aspirational. We thought it could have grabbed that Kiwi dream, made it aspirational, reached for the stars and made a real difference to those who we know the tax system could. This doesn't. Thank you very much.